There was some baseball news over the weekend, Pat, and the Mets and Yankees both improving their roster, and the Yanks coming to terms with Paul Goldschmidt on a one-year deal. He formerly of the St. Louis Cardinals, the Arizona Diamondbacks. Remember, this guy was the National League MVP back in 2022. He's kind of fallen off a cliff, though, since then, and at 37 years of age, he's obviously not the future, but the Yankees and Brian Cashman, I'm sure, thinking 1 year, try to squeeze as much good baseball as you can out of him, try to spare him when possible to keep him light on his feet. The guy's pretty durable, give him that, but to keep that bat fresh more than anything else. He's lost a little bit of range at first base with the glove, but I think there are worse options for the Yankees, and when you consider the financial commitment they've already put into some other areas, like giving Max Fried the big deal, improving the back of the bullpen with Devin Williams. 1 year, $12 million for Paul Goldschmidt. It's not the end of the world, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it was a home run signing by any stretch.
No, it's not a game changer. I don't think. I think it's fine, and especially at that number. You know, He's
better than Anthony Rizzo. He's better than Anthony Rizzo.
It's better than what they were getting. Right. Not just Rizzo when he played, but he had clearly lost it. This is a team that in the first round of the playoffs was platooning John Birdie and Oswaldo Cabrera at first base. I mean, think about that. First base for the Yankees. In our lifetimes, Dan, you've gone from Mattingly to Tino to Giambi to Teixeira as the Yankees' first baseman, and now you're in the playoffs this year with designs on, and they did reach the World Series, but designs on winning the World Series, and you're platooning Oswaldo Cabrera and John Birdie. So, yeah, from a production standpoint, I don't think there's going to be a drop-off at that number. $12 million, I think it's fine. I'm anti-right-handed hitters, or too many right-handed hitters in the Yankees lineup. I'm anti, let's sign
Brian Cashman for a while.
let's sign a 37-year-old, who's got a great resume, but, is clearly on the decline of his career. And both of these things smack of that. But the 1 year and the $12 million and the fact that it's a low bar, what they were getting at that position anyway, I think it's fine.
Yeah, it really is not the end of the world. Like, when I heard the news on Saturday, when it was like, okay, I was like, all right, not bad. Like, it doesn't really move the needle by any stretch. I mean, I think Devin Williams did that more. I certainly think that Max Fried probably did that a little bit better as far as the Yankee fan is concerned. This was it was okay. And in turn, you look around now at what the Yankees still have to satisfy here in terms of rounding out this roster and, continuing the so-called Plan B from moving on from Juan Soto. Okay, you still need, in all likelihood, a third baseman, because Jazz Chisholm is, I think they prefer him to play second base, but he has that flexibility. So you need a third baseman. Now it appears certainly that Cody Bellinger is going to be your center fielder. So are you comfortable sticking Jason Dominguez in left field? We shall see. A couple of other arms in middle relief, I don't think would necessarily hurt this team in any way, but at least you're starting to see this Yankee team start to take shape as to the one you're probably going to see once spring training hits, and as we get closer to opening day. I mean, this is who the Yankees are. I can't see them making another so-called blockbuster addition between now and spring training. I think this is pretty much it. All the heavy lifting is done.
Yeah, and I think the bullpen has been pretty well solidified. Devin Williams, obviously the biggest piece there. This trade that they made over the weekend also is kind of beneath the radar. The Yankees traded Jose Trevino to the Reds for a couple of players. Alex Jackson, a backup catcher. But this guy, Fernando Cruz, I think had maybe the best strikeout to innings pitched ratio out of relievers in Major League Baseball. So that's another swing and miss guy, another swing and miss arm that they're putting in their bullpen to kind of solidify that underbelly, in front of Devin Williams and in front of Luke Weaver, who obviously is going to have a big role in this bullpen. Yeah, it's third base. Yeah, and you mentioned Dominguez. If not now, then when? Like, this guy should be your starting left fielder on opening day. Was his defense that bad? And then what we were just saying about Goldschmidt replacing what the production was at first base. What's the production that Dominguez has to, exceed in left field? What did Alex Verdugo give you last year after the month of April? He was actually decent in the playoffs, so I'll give him that. But over the course of the entire season, it shouldn't be a Herculean task to exceed what Alex Verdugo gave you offensively last year.
No, definitely not. And also, back to Goldschmidt, if you think about like how they got to this point, okay, you thought that they were in the conversation maybe for a Christian Walker. Well, Christian Walker got 3 years for the Houston Astros. Maybe the Yankees weren't willing to swim in those waters.
They shouldn't have been.
Right, and I agree. So Christian Walker, Paul Goldschmidt, You look at Carlos Santana, Nathaniel Lowe ends up with the Washington Nationals, for example. All these big names, or at least the biggest names out there in free agency and trade and whatnot there at the first base position, there's still one that's out there. And there's still one team in particular that needs a first baseman. And the way the dominoes are falling here, Pat, barring something pretty unexpected, it looks as if the Mets and Pete Alonso, there's a good chance that they're probably going to find each other once again. Pete's probably going to get paid a little bit less than maybe he had hoped because the market is kind of coming back to the Mets here. But it certainly looks like that the possibility is increasing that the polar bear is not going to be leaving Queens.
I think that's great. And I think that's the best possible outcome for both sides. Obviously, Alonso wanted top dollar, but sometimes when you hit the open market, like you said, the numbers don't the market doesn't go in your direction. And that seems to be the case here. He's not going to be playing for a pittance for sure. And at this point, if you're Steve Cohen and you're the Mets and what you've proven to have the appetite for in terms of salary, what's an extra, whatever it's going to be for Pete Alonso to really solidify your team? Now that you're getting your pitching rotation, that was the biggest concern when you looked at the Mets. You're confident with the lineup, even more so if you bring back Alonso. But the pitching starting rotation was a big concern, and that seems to have been solidified more with the signing of Sean Manaea.
And that was surprising, too, and it came down really late last night. I think Passan broke it sometime around between 1:30 and 2 o'clock in the morning. But, the Mets get him for 3 years. A lot of the money is deferred. Manaea probably thought that he was going to be able to get a 4-year deal from somebody, from some other club, and it didn't happen that way. And just like we talked about with Pete Alonso, they found each other again. And the Mets kicked in some deferrals, and he's going to get the money later on past his playing career. But still, it's a win-win. And look, Manaea was a great story last year. I'll be honest with you. I'm not 1,000% convinced that the Manaea we saw last year, you're just going to see this guy moving forward. I need to see it again. And I know that they tinkered with his delivery and the release point and all those other things, which is great, but I just need to see more. But I'm glad that he's back because you look at the starting rotation right now. Okay, you have Manaea, Senga, who last year was a complete wash. You got absolutely nothing from him. Montas, they're hoping they're able to tap into the best of what he has to offer, getting him in their so-called pitching lab. Then David Peterson, who was coming off a really, really good year, but the best year of his career. Can he string another good season together? And now you're going to have Clay Holmes that you're trying to revert back to a starting pitcher after he's been a reliever for the last handful of years. So to me, still a lot of question marks with this starting staff. And look, I'm not really of the belief that just signing these guys to the low-risk, high-reward potential contracts is the way to go. They got lucky last year, I think. I don't know if that's something they could do year in and year out.
No, and that's the exact point I was going to make. If you think about the rotation last year, especially when they lost Senga during spring training and he only made one start for them the entire regular season, even before that, there was a lot of hope. Your success was hinging on hope that a lot of those guys would pitch above and beyond what you could reasonably expect. And you got that from Severino, and you got that from Manaea. You got that from Peterson. You got that from McGill. I mean, you got that from virtually your entire starting rotation last year. How often does that happen? That was the key to their turnaround from late May on. Their lineup was always fine. It was always going to be fine last year. It, took off when Lindor went to another level last season. But the reason why the Mets were able to get back in, stay in the pennant race, and ultimately get to the playoffs was their starting rotation gave you a lot more than you could have expected. And can you reasonably expect that to be the case for a second straight year?
Yeah, I don't know, to be quite honest. I'm not convinced. I really and truly am not. And also, you look at, there's a couple of spots in that lineup that need shoring up. Now, look, if Pete Alonso comes back, okay, he's your first baseman. At least for now, Jeff McNeil's your second baseman, but who knows? I still think he could be trade bait potentially because they got all those youngsters in the minor leagues that are middle infielders that I'm sure they would like to bring up at some point and give them an opportunity. The Ronnie Mauricios, the Luis Angel Acuñas, even Jet Williams for crying out loud. A lot of those guys are all the same. They were even tinkering with the possibility of, playing Brett Beatty at second base a little bit here this year. What do you do do with Starling Marte? Is he a guy who's definitely back on this team next year? Heading into the final season of his contract, he represents value if you do want to look to maybe move him someplace else. So a lot still to do, and I know that this isn't something that's going to, keep the average fan up at night. But the other thing with the Mets, because the Soto move is what got all the attention and the price tag and everything, look at that Mets bench right now. It's not going to really scare anybody. I mean, really and truly, it's Tyrone Taylor and a few other guys. You know what I mean? Like that, Luis Torrens is your backup catcher. Tyrone Taylor, Luis Torrens, and who else? So David Stearns, and I think he knows this, Pat, he's got some work to do here before now in spring training.
Yeah, he does. And what's the bullpen look like, too, right? By the end of the year in the playoffs, how many really, truly reliable arms did you have in that bullpen? 3? On a good day, 4? So what's the status of that? Look, when you pay someone what you're paying Juan Soto, $55 million a year, inevitably that's going to chip away at other areas, whether it's certain spots in the lineup, whether it's your bullpen depth, whether it's your bench depth. So yeah, now David Stearns has to get creative, still with the financial wherewithal of Steve Cohen, and plug those holes.